We're gonna move into the NBA. I want to keep this with you because you know, there's a lot of conversation going on in the NBA as I change the topic at the bottom of the screen. Okay, how should we feel about Jayson Tatum's MVP, candidacy, right? Because a lot of people's talking about that right now, right? Ever since the All-Star break, when this brother came out and say he wants to win an MVP, he wants to win a championship. A lot of people has been going back and forth, about him being a legitimate MVP candidate. And I'm confused, right? There's a lot of ways you could look at this, but I want to hear from you before I get my opinion. What do you think about this?
Jayson Tatum, he's always been a guy who's been an interesting character in terms of like MVP, right? We know he has talent. We know his ability to score the basketball and do different things. It's just not at the level as his peers who are in the MVP conversation. When you look at a guy like Luka Doncic, I'm not gonna say and put Tatum over Luka Doncic in terms of offense, or like stuff like that nature. But we're talking about MVP, talking about the most valuable player on a team. And when you look at everyone who's on that list, I don't know if Tatum is more viable to the Celtics than a Jokic to the Nuggets, or Anthony Edwards to the Timberwolves, or Luka Doncic, like I said, to the Mavericks. I don't think he is as valuable as everyone says he is, because if you remove Tatum from the Celtics today, the Celtics are still a playoff team. The Celtics are still in conversation to be a top 4 team in the East because they have so much talent in that starting lineup. It is not just, oh, it's Tatum. He's the head of the snake. He leads everybody. No, the whole team is very talented. You're talking about Porzingis. You're talking about Jaylen Brown. You're talking about Drew Holiday, Derek White. There's a lot of guys in that starting lineup that complements not only what Tatum does, but Tatum also complements a lot of stuff that Jaylen Brown does. Because Jaylen Brown's a guy who dribbles, drives to the paint, even on making a lot of tough shots that gets a lot of more people open. It's not just one way or the other. So I think that's why when people discuss Tatum's MVP candidacy, they have a lot of hesitation because of how good that starting lineup plays with or without Tatum. So I think that's how we should feel. I feel like he is slighted. I feel like he is a guy who could potentially win an MVP, but unfortunately, he has to elevate even more than where he is right now, even though he's averaging, I think, 30 a game or something like that. He has to go even further and probably average 35 to get people to take him seriously because of how stacked that starting lineup is.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about arguably the most talented 6 in the NBA right now. But, I even heard an argument, he's the best player on the best team in the Eastern Conference, right? So there's that argument of the equation. But I agree with you. I look at value. If you were subtracted from this team, your team would not be a playoff team. That's where I find the true value at. And I think those guys that you named, Luka, Jokic, even SGA, Anthony Edwards, I think those guys fit that mold more so than Jayson Tatum does. But I think when you talk about that 5-game road trip that they had, I believe it's 5, he's shooting like 38% from the field. And it's not even only about that, right? It's not only about the shooting numbers. But I think when you talk about a guy like Jayson Tatum who, during the All-Star break, said that I want to win an MVP. I want to win a championship. I want to be the face of the league. You're going to have to show up and take that. I feel like when you talk about a guy like Tatum, right? When you say the word Tatum, Jalil, what does that mean to you? Like, how do you view that player? I feel that's a guy who waits for the game to come to him more so than him going for the game. Like, when you are a guy that wants to accomplish those things that he's talking about he wants to accomplish, those things are not going to come at your door. It's not going to come to you. You got to go get it. And I think if that means taking more than 6 shots against the defending champs in the first half, then that means taking more shots. If that means getting your teammates involved while you bring them home in the fourth quarter, then that means just that. But in the fourth quarter, I mean, you're talking about a guy who said, and I quote, he's, you want to be like Kobe. He's from that Kobe tree. He models his game like Kobe. But Kobe in the fourth quarter was an assassin. And this guy's not one. Okay, we'll talk about the fourth quarter numbers in my second lap. But I think when you talk about the Celtics in general, in the big moments, right? Go a couple years back to the NBA Finals. Historically, that was one of the worst individual performances, in the finals that Jayson Tatum pulled out. Okay, with a team having a golden opportunity to go up 3-1 and win that championship, right? Then you talk about them losing to the Pacers and they're playing. They clearly a better team than the Pacers, right? Then you're talking about a couple games ago against the Cavaliers. They're up 22 in the fourth quarter. They lose that game. You talk about last year in the Eastern Conference Final. They lose to Miami in a hard-fought Game 7. They didn't even need to be down 0-3. They showed you when they came back and won 3 straight games that they should have had been down 3 straight games. But why was they? Okay, you talk about the Game 6 against the 76ers. 0 for 8. Heading into halftime, then he wakes up and be like, oh, yeah, I am Jayson Tatum, I can take over the game. And then he takes over the game. We need more of that. It's consistency that I want to see from a guy like Tatum. When I look at a guy like Jokic, I see consistency, numbers, not only numbers, but impact. So, yeah, you got the stat sheet, the triple-double. Yeah, it's cute, but you got the impact. I make teammates around me better. I find guys. I get guys open. I make the good passes. I play like a point guard, even though I'm a center. I'm not a pretender. Okay? Enter the center. Okay? Yes. Boss. Right? I see impact, even without Jamal Murray. Because you could say, well, they got the best two-man game in basketball. Yeah. Well, we saw the Nuggets without Jamal Murray. And he brought them to the playoffs. That's impact. That's why he could arguably win the MVP again this year. Back to back to back. Okay? Because of impact. SGA, not the most flashiest player, but he knows how to get downhill, use his size, find his spot, and once again, constant numbers every single game, right? He's consistent. That's why I would have him ahead of Jayson Tatum. It's little things like that. Luka Doncic, consistent, right? So I understand that Tatum, even when he's not going off and we're not seeing great numbers, that he does find little nuanced ways to impact the game. But at the end of the day, when we come to that fourth quarter and you want to be the MVP and you want to be a champion, you can't be looking at Jaylen Brown like, what you going to do? No, you got to do it. And that's my problem with the Jayson Tatum conundrum.
Yeah. Also, the Celtics don't play a lot of fourth quarter games. I feel like not even at all. Like it's rare that they're playing in the fourth quarter. And I think when they
do you think that's going to help them real quick? Quick question. That's a very good point because they're not. And when they are, they haven't been great in those moments this year. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's going to, because they have a known issue down the stretch in those high profile games, in those playoffs, they haven't historically been good in those situations. They tighten up, right? Do you think they get stagnant? They do crazy turnovers. Do you think them blowing out these teams that they're blowing out is going to affect them down the stretch in those fourth quarter moments come playoffs?
Well, I'm talking about the playoffs in general. It's going to hurt them immediately in that first round. The game changes in playoffs, and you have to expect them to still play at the high efficiency that they're playing at in the playoffs. I don't see it happening. I think they don't have a go-to player in the fourth quarter. Even with Tatum playing as good as he is, he can't do it all the time. He's not a consistent fourth quarter guy. And you could talk about the numbers, you could talk about the shot efficiency and the shot percentages and things of that nature. He's just not a fourth quarter guy when you need a basket, especially Jaylen Brown. He's another guy who forces sometimes too much and it creates turnovers, as we just talked about. And it's gonna be a situation where you gotta put guys see that in the playoffs, and where the game's gonna be tight. Damn near every series is gonna be a tight series. You have to expect that. You have to damn near have this anticipation of the games going to be down the wire every single game. So I got to make sure I'm on my A game. And I think the Celtics are too lax. I think they're so comfortable blowing teams up by 40, 30, X, Y, and Z that when the playoffs come, when they're playing against a good team and they're playing against a defensive-minded force, it's going to cause issues for them. And they may lose. They may get upset by somebody early. It might not be just the Eastern Conference Finals. It might be semis. It might be the first round if they continue to play.
Especially if they play Miami. They played Miami in the first round. I don't even want to think about that because Miami took them to the end and back to back. They won obviously last year, but before that, Game 7. But I think for me, right? I think when you talk about that in particular, crunch time, late game execution, fourth quarter playoffs, when the shots are not falling, because right now they're shooting great. I mean, I think the lowest percentage 3-point shooting wise is Jaylen Brown in the starting lineup, and that's like 33% or something like that. But you got guys like Drew Holiday shooting over 40%. You got Kristaps shooting well. You got Tatum, shooting well as well. Derek White is trying to find himself again. But if the shots are not falling, can you generate consistent buckets? Or you're going to have these wild sequences that you normally have from a Jaylen Brown Tatum-led team in the playoffs, right? Those are the questions that I have that I need answers for. And obviously, when that time comes, I'm going to be able to get my answers. We're going to see front and center. But I think for me, my last point here, I want to go back to Draymond Green's point when asked about Tatum specifically in this conversation that we having. They asked him, can Tatum win an MVP? And I think he laid it out great. He said that he got to win a championship first because he has to prove to everybody that he is that dude. And I agree 1000%. I remember, people around me, big NBA guys, guys like my guy. I don't even say him because he wasn't the one that pushed that narrative. But there was a lot of the NBA guys that was pushing Giannis down my throat. Oh, he's the best player in the NBA. But it wasn't until he won the chip and he had that amazing finals run where I was like, yeah, that's the best player in the world. Okay. We knew Jokic was, winning MVPs back to back, but it wasn't until he went on that finals run and playoff run and finals run where I was like, yeah, that's the best player in basketball by a mile. And it's not even close. Right. So I think we need that from a guy like Tatum for us to be like, okay, he may not be the best player in the world, but he's top 5. And that's how the following season, he could already be an MVP candidate. And if he develops consistency, he'll have the inside track, being that he won the finals to win that award. So that's how I look at it.
It's interesting what the Celtics are going to do in this playoffs, because if Tatum goes down, they have players to pick up the slack, especially a guy like a Drew Holiday who's been there already. He's been to the finals, who won a championship. Jaylen Brown's going to have to step up to another level to really see what that $60 million contract per year going to be earning, basically, right? And this is when if time comes, because Tatum might be proving that he can't be the number 1 on the team.
Yeah. We'll see what happens with these Boston Celtics and if they could keep up, their season. They're a very good season right now.
Please like and subscribe for all the up-to-date content. You've been slinging shows left and right, slinging content left and right. Please don't miss anything. If you do, like, subscribe, leave a comment, leave a question, something you may want to answer, something you may have. All ideas are great ideas. Nothing's a dumb question.